Bonjour. 10 centuries ago, sailors and traders living like us under the sun of the Mediterranean coast wanted to communicate between each side of the Mare Nostrum. Sabir was born, a mix of languages from the Mediterranean basin. Sabir was the common ground for many different cultural groups, giving them the ability to communicate, exchange, and share ideas and knowledge. Deriving from the Latin-based word saber, sabir means to know. Sabir is one of the Mediterranean lingua franca, like Koine Greek was before being replaced by another lingua franca, Latin. But what is a lingua franca? Well, a lingua franca is a language used as a common language between speakers whose native languages are different. In 135 years ago, in 1880, in a small church in Bavaria, a priest mixed words from French, English, and German, giving birth to a newly constructed language he called Volapük. Unfortunately for him, it was way too far to use. 7 years later, a Polish man who called himself Doktoro Esperanto created an easy-to-learn, universal, and a politically neutral language that was supposed to be used by every human on this planet to communicate between each other. Well, this is why you're listening to a French man talking to you in English, because languages are directly linked to power and history. Spread by the British Empire during the 19th century, reinforced by the preeminence of English-speaking countries, and especially the United States during the 20th century, English is the current lingua franca of the world. It is used in international business, in education, in science, in technology, in entertainment. It has even replaced French as the lingua franca of diplomacy. English is spoken today by almost 2 billion people as a native or a foreign language. English is spoken today by almost a third of the world's population. Well, I talked about yesterday, I talked about today, but what about tomorrow? What languages will the generations made in the future use to build tomorrow's world together? Well, some might argue that Chinese will become the global language of tomorrow because of its 1.39 billion native speakers and its widespread across the world. Nevertheless, the writing system and the tones of Chinese are far too complicated to learn beyond childhood, and thus counting out its potential spread across the world. Easier to learn, English is so deeply entrenched in media, in print, and in education that tomorrow, changing the world's lingua franca from English to Mandarin Chinese would entail an enormous effort for next generations. Well, if Chinese is too hard to learn in the future, what about other languages? What are their chances? What about Spanish? What about Arabic? Well, as far as Spanish and Arabic are concerned, they should remain global languages because of their large number of native speakers and because of their widespread in the world. Et le français? What about French? Well, French is already an official language in many international institutions. It is already the second most learned foreign language in the world. It is present on all continents, and it is growing rapidly in the fastest growing areas of the world. France could become one day the lingua franca of the world. Wouldn't it be a déjà vu? Even though English will probably remain as the global language of tomorrow, the main changes in languages might be more in their forms themselves than on their own spread in human communications. There are 6,000 spoken languages today in the world. According to linguists, only 600 will be left on this planet by the beginning of the 22nd century. And how could we explain such a phenomenon? Well, it is easy to understand that for speakers, they associate larger languages with opportunities and smaller ones with backwardness. And therefore, they stop speaking the smaller ones to their children. Only 200 languages are spoken today. And for the others, for the only spoken languages, this break in their generational heritage is synonymous with extinction. There is another factor explaining this, it's literacy. Despite, of course, its benefits, literacy is one of the main causes explaining why speakers choose to use written languages instead of only spoken languages. And therefore, this trend will cause the extinction of a large number of languages in the next decades. So in the future, we will speak fewer languages, but they might also be an evolution in the languages themselves. If we look at history, we can see that major evolutions in languages appeared when massive populations crossed oceans at one time or were taken by force into a new territory. Then, the languages are taught to adults instead of children. And because these languages are taught to adults instead of children, and as you may know, it's not that easy for adults to learn new languages, then the adults simplify the details of the languages. The same phenomenon could occur globally in the future. Environmental migration caused by climate change might lead to abrupt and massive movements of populations across the world. People, cultures, languages will then meet, and from this confrontation, a new process of simplification of the languages might start. But I'm sure that they will still use a lingua franca that will probably be English. So in short, tomorrow we will speak English as our international language, we will speak fewer languages globally, and the languages that we will speak will be simpler. In our world becoming more and more connected, this language is 2.0, and the use of a widely spread international language will release our creativity, enabling us to share even more ideas. And believe me, after what happened yesterday in my country, this is what the world of today and what the world of tomorrow need. The future we're expecting may follow all of these predictions. However, isn't it characteristic of human nature to always find ways to surprise us? Merci.